evening, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyera. I am your gracious co-host, Alex Fournette, as I botched the word co-host. Gracious co-host, Alex Fournette, looking to bring you another awesome installment. And tonight I got my usual co-host with me. To my left, Mr. Jamey Baskow, the veteran of Flyers Nitty Gritty. How we doing tonight, Jamey?
Good, man. Aloha mahalo. It's been quite a busy week here in Flyer land, believe it or not, and it's kind of weird, being that we're in the dead smack thick of the summer here. Usually things are starting to wind down, but here in Flyer land, they just keep on coming.
This is the thing with this team. We always get news to produce, and it comes rapid fire nonstop. So I'll say one thing. Being a Flyers fan is never boring. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
So we got the seasoned veteran. Now up to my right, we got the up-and-coming A-quality prospect, Mr. Dylan Robillard. How we doing tonight, my guy?
Good. How's everything?
Not too bad. As I was saying off air, just been spending the weekend out in Newburyport at my girlfriend's family's house, having a good time. Now everything's winding down a little bit, so I said, let's talk some Flyers hockey. What do you say, gentlemen? You up for it?
Let's go Flyers, man. Here, spreading the news in Massachusetts. I love it, man.
May have to spread it a little more than just the episode. But all right, let's get right into the things tonight. So we got three interesting topics we plan on touching on. This has been a pretty busy last couple of weeks. I originally anticipated having a little bit more of a leeway than this, but there was just too much news not to come back sooner than we did. So first thing we're going to touch on tonight is the Alexei Kolosov saga. So this has been interesting. This is something that's been kind of going back since earlier in the year, even dating back to the 2023-24 season. Came over to the AHL, didn't get too much playing time. There was a little bit of questions about how he was used. I think he only had, 2 games, I think, if that?
2. Yeah, 2 out of 14.
And it was a lot of – he was, I think, the third-string goalie out with the Phantoms, and it led to a bit of a trickle effect, originally stating that from a few news sources that – he wasn't thrilled about his time here. He didn't like the way he was used. And there's even reports about him maybe wanting to terminate his contract. Oh, my God. Contract. I'm botching everything tonight. To go back to Mother Russia, to the KHL. And this has been kind of an ongoing thing. Then we go back to the July 1st meeting at the beginning of free agency. Danny Briere pretty much threw a bottle of water on that fire and said, no, there's nothing to worry about. As far as we know, Kolosov's coming over, whole 9 yards. Doesn't show up to rookie camp. There was a flight issue and everything. I can't remember the country that he got stuck at. But there was a layover issue where he couldn't end up making it. And then there was reports talking about how he wanted to go back to the KHL and have his NHL contract terminated. And then we get today's report from Bill stating now that he does end up intending to play here. That a lot of the stuff that has been coming out with the media hasn't been exactly accurate. So I just want everyone's take with this. This has been one big giant roller coaster. First, it seems like everything's going smoothly. Then we get a rocky trail. Then Danny throws some water on the fire, and back to a rocky trail. And now Bill throws more water on the fire. Dylan, I'm going to start with you. What is your take on this? How do you feel about how this has been handled? Because I personally haven't been a great fan, but I'll go a little more in depth in a little bit. But Dylan, let me hear your take first. How do you feel about how everything's gone so far?
It's definitely been a mess. It's not been very clean cut. But I guess that's kind of been the way it's been with a bunch of the Russia stuff we've seen and dealt with, because obviously there's Russian outlets and we don't really know which ones to trust. Like there's the Match one and then there's other ones. And we've kind of been relying on that for, like the Michkov news and stuff and like Zaverian and whatnot. So, And if you don't really know which ones to trust, it's kind of like you're kind of just picking and choosing what you see, because there was reports that Michkov didn't want to come, and there was stuff with Kolosov. So, I mean, I think I just find it weird that stuff continues to come up. There's not really been a complete stop. Like Danny Briere will say we're all good. Like as far as we know, he's not coming. And then a week later, there'll be something else thrown in. Like it seems really repetitive, and like we're bringing up old news that was already been brought up earlier, but it just won't die down. There's always something like every other week, and I just find that really weird. Like I don't know why it's been like that. Like usually after someone says, okay, this isn't true anymore, you move on. But every other week there's been like Kolosov says this, Kolosov says that, he doesn't want to play here, but no, he's actually going to come. So I don't know. There's a lot to kind of break down and consider here. I mean, the team still denies that these reports are true, so you'd never really know until he comes back. Like
we're really not going to get a definitive answer probably until training camp. It feels like
exactly, and like he went home because the Flyers said he could, because he's been playing for so long and he wanted to go back home and reset after like staying in the hotel or whatever happened the month that he was in Philly. So, or I guess close to Allentown, whatever it may be. But I don't know. I mean, I'd love for him to come. Like you lose another prospect and you start, that spirals even more, because you're kind of diminishing what you already have if you're not bringing more in. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I mean, from what I understand, he's fine. Like it's just hard to say when he physically won't come out and say it himself, because really he can't. So it's just, there's a bunch of layers to it. It's hearsay. There's people, like, it has to go through like 5 people to get to Danny Briere, or if Danny Briere is talking face to face, it's someone else telling us. So it's a big puzzle. So I don't really know. As long as he's here day one, then
we'll get our questions answered.
So we'll see, but that spirals even more too, because terminating his contract and figuring that all out, and so I don't know how loaning him back works either. Like if you can do that for another year, if you want to do that for another year, like. But then if you do that, I think you're just never going to see him again. If you keep pushing it back and pushing it back, well, then he's not going to come at all. But if he seems like he wants to come, Jamey's said, or you've seen him with Phantoms gear on, and he's got Flyers stuff like Michkov did. Like, I think he wants to be here. It's just figuring it all out and actually getting him here and setting him up properly.
Yes.
Who cares if it's a 4-star hotel? He didn't speak any English. Like, the kid doesn't know what he's 22, but like, so what? He is not adjusting well in a month to hotel life, and like it's difficult. So I don't know. We'll see how they handle it, because obviously you got to handle Michkov and Fedotov a lot better than that, so it doesn't happen again. And I think they handled. I think they handled Fedotov a lot better than Kolosov. It was kind of, they both came at the same time, and then one kind of got pushed out a little bit because he went to Allentown, right? So they couldn't really focus on him as much. And Fedotov had teammates, and he had all of this. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation. So I guess we'll see how it continues over the summer.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the whole hotel thing too, because from what we were hearing, the guy, like as you mentioned, he was waiting there a month. He didn't have any teammates to adjust with. And what's really crazy, and it makes me wonder if the Flyers could do this all over again. Would they have just said, you know what, let's wait till 2025, 26, see where things are, give them the full off season to adjust, and just bring him over for a month and handle it the way things were handled? Do you think we even are in this situation now if he ended up staying in Russia for the summer and then came over and adjusted a little bit more? The Dotov would have been over here a little bit longer. You would have had Michkov here. Zamula's already here. he could have at least talked with some of the actual Flyers teammates during rookie training camp to maybe help the adjustment a little bit. So I look at that and I'm like, I really feel like that was a big speed bump they went over with this, is maybe bringing him over early in the way they handled this. Jamey, let me hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so Dylan and I have spoken a lot about this, actually, even on the side. And, it's about tempering expectations and trying to be like due diligent on what's been reported and whatnot. That's why you don't see me like go nuts or like tweet anything in terms of rumors or anything. But what I will tweet out are, like Dylan said, about a photo with him wearing Phantoms, a Phantoms jersey and a Flyers helmet, because I don't think that a person with that doesn't want to return here would wear their gear. Rather, they would wear like an all red jersey or an all gray jersey and not just wear anything at all, not even Dynamo's, colors. He didn't have to wear any type of jersey, but he's elected to wear a Flyers mask and a Phantoms, jersey. And we've seen that with Matvei Michkov, with him wearing, jerseys and wearing T-shirts and going back to even before last training camp, he was wearing orange shoes, if you can remember that. So that to me indicated, okay, he's going to become a Flyer possibly as early as next year if he's already donning their colors and stuff like that. I don't think that he just said, hey, let me go select orange shoes. I think that was a shot saying, hey, I'm intending to come, although not saying it. I think he knew what was going on in Sochi. So the same thing with Kolosov. I think that he was brought over too early. I think the Flyers learned from it. I think that not that they got impatient, but this is what happens with NCAA players. Their season ends, bring them in. Like if Cutter's season end, if he was a Flyer, they would have elected to sign his ELC. He would have signed his ELC. He would have played, possibly as early as April, late March. You know what I mean? With NCAA players, that's quite common. KHL, their season begins sooner than the NHL. So, his season ended at the end of February, beginning of March there, around that area. So, the NHL season still has a month and a half left. So this was on Danny Briere. He was a rookie GM. He's not used to this stuff. So he's like, hey, let's try to get him adjusted. Let's bring him over. And that was with Kolosov's acceptance, too. Just because he's under contract with Philadelphia, he doesn't have to necessarily say, okay, his season ended with Dynamo. He's no longer impacted in Philadelphia. He wanted to come. So he came and he became homesick. That's rightful. That's understandable. Did he say he didn't want to return? I don't know. No one really knows. I mean, there's sources here, sources there. I trust Tony. Tony's a good reporter. I'm not saying that he didn't, but when I see a person wearing gear 2 weeks ago, I don't know. I think he may have had a change of heart. The change of heart could have been Danny Briere. Hey, would your mom and dad like to come over with you, this fall, for training camp? Would your brother and your sisters want to come over? Because if you could recall, this is great timing of the press conference. On Wednesday, during the presser, Michkov said that the Flyers are trying to bring his brother and his mom over. They should be here right around the time that training camp begins. He would say
with Drysdale too. When they first traded for him, they got his parents.
Exactly. And I think that this was a different kind of situation. I don't think that they had enough time to get the visas and everything required to bring his family over. Hey, you're homesick? All right. How about we bring your family with you? Maybe that's the change of heart. Maybe that's why now he's donning their gear. Maybe he had no intentions of coming back. Maybe he really didn't have intentions of going back to Lehigh. But now when you're saying, hey, I'm going to bring your family, wow, really? That may change a thing or two. And that's why I'm staying to the wayside. And like we said, it could be, I heard visa issues, for in terms of dev camp. Then I hear that, what you guys heard, that he missed the flight. So I don't know. We don't know what to believe. There's a lack of information, like Dylan alluded to, with, coming out of Russia. It's hard to get accurate information. There's only a select few sites, like Belarus Hockey is good. Matt, like he said, Hockey News Hub, Match, those are some good, resources and sources there, but that's about it. So you sort of have to trust them for what they say, because there's not much else. There's like one other reporter coming out from who reports accurately on AHL. And that's pretty much it. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. Who do you trust? You trust the organization. So maybe that the Flyers are bringing his family over now. I think that the Flyers told him, hey, this is the peg. This is what we expect. I think that they said Samuel Erson's our guy because John Tortorella is a big Sam Ersson fan. There's no way he goes against that Sam Ersson being number one. He was a fan from the time he started, from the time he put on those pads. John Tortorella was a lover of Samuel Ersson. So Sam Ersson was always the number one. Ivan Fedotov, unfortunately, is older than Alexei Kolosov. We have to say that. We have to, yes, he's 27. He's 4 years older than Kolosov. He's played in the KHL longer than Kolosov. Kolosov is a phenomenal goaltender, but he's only 23. And I think that's why they're like, hey, he's 27, you're 23. Go to the AHL. I don't think they lied by any means. I think they told him exactly what was going to happen. And they even, like Bill's article said, and I'm happy he said it because that's exactly what I was going to say. He was the backup. I want to say this. He was the backup to Cal Peterson in the playoffs. It wasn't Felix Sandstrom. Felix Sandstrom wasn't pegged ahead of Alexei Kolosov. Alexei was the backup. Sandstrom was the healthy scratch. So if there was an injury or something, or Cal Peterson wasn't playing well, Kolosov is then coming in to play in the playoff game. Peterson just got hot. That's it. That's all. At the end of the season, who knows what they intended, but the intentions maybe were more to possibly get him more than 2 games. But Peterson was just too hot. He was too hot to take off the ice. He's pitching shutout. He's they're winning games 1-0. They're winning games 2-1. He wasn't giving up more than a goal. It was kind of hard to just say take out Cal went to an unknown in Kolosov. And even in the 2 games that Kolosov played, it was 5-4. Although the AHL is a high scoring league, so I don't pay no mind to numbers. I'm just saying, painting it like it wasn't just like, oh my God, he played lights out. Why isn't he playing? I just wanted to say that. Now, is Cal Peterson pegged ahead of Kolosov? No, I actually think that they're on the same level right now. I don't think that anyone's pegged against more than anybody. You have to earn it. And I think that if Kolosov comes back, let's just say he comes back and he has a hell of a preseason, has a hell of a training camp for the Phantoms, he's going to be starter on opening night. That's it. Lappy doesn't choose, hey, okay, this person. He's going to play who he thinks gives him the best shot at winning. If Kolosov is at that point to give him the best shot at winning, he's going to play Kolosov. If he thinks if Peterson outplays Kolosov, during training camp, then Peterson may start opening night. You know what I mean? So I don't think really anybody's starting opening night right now. I just think that, we'll have to see if Kolosov comes back. And as of right now, if you ask me, I think he is. I don't think that he would wear gear. Again, the gear thing is strikes me. I don't. If he had no intentions of returning, I really don't think he would be wearing that gear 2 weeks ago.
Fair. That's a fair point. And one other couple things to add to some of your points, Jamie. One thing I've heard a few people bring up is the mention that Fedotov coming over when he did maybe caught Kolosov by surprise. Maybe he didn't know about it. One thing a lot of people don't know: Kolosov and Fedotov have the same agent. So I don't think this was anything along those regards. That hey, Alexei, we're going to promise you that you're going to find a path to being the backup goaltender at the end of the year and then maybe compete with a starting job in 2024-25. No, I don't think it was anything like that. I think that it was purely what these rumors are is based off of adjustment. And, I hear some people try to blame Kolosov for this crap too. And I'm like, come on, man. It's not this kid's fault. I completely understand where he's coming from. This is completely different from the Cutter Gauthier nonsense, where he wouldn't even talk to John LeClaire and Danny Briere and all the brass guys that they sent all the way overseas to try to communicate with this guy. So this is 2 completely different instances. Even if for some reason the worst case scenario does happen, I'm not putting nearly, if any, blame on this kid at all, because the way these events have completely transpired are completely different from the nonsense that happened with Cutter Gauthier. And I'm tending to agree with you, Jamie. You made a lot of good points. I think the fact that he was donning a lot of the Flyers gear like that is a comforting thing from 2 weeks ago that, hey, why would you wear this if you're not coming over? Matvei Michkov did the same stuff during all of his workouts out in Russia. And what do you know? That when there was smoke, there was fire. He found his way here, and now we're going to have him night one of opening night. And another interesting tidbit, as you guys have mentioned, he's 23 years old. Goalies take a little bit longer to develop.
Yeah.
This is nuts. You don't want to rush a goalie into this instance when he's not 100% ready. Having him in the AHL for 2 years while Fedotov and Urson end up, battling for the starting gig or being a 1A, 1B like Carter Hart and Urson were last year, be good. By the time Kolosov comes over, and if, things don't work out with one of those two goalies, maybe you can trade one of them, and he comes over in his second sometime in 2025-26 to the Flyers. Who knows? And by then, maybe he has about a year and a half of AHL experience. He feels a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. They're not throwing him into the bonfire like that. Having the time to develop for him over these next 2 years, assuming he does come over, that is going to be very critical. You don't want to throw this into a situation that you don't feel like he could succeed. And, I think 2025-26, the Flyers are going to have a better team that they could produce on the ice than this year in 2024-25. They'll have a little more cap space.
Yeah.
They're going to lose a lot of these LTIR guys. Maybe they end up moving some guys like Ristolainen, maybe find a take for Ryan Ellis's contract if they attach a draft pick to it. That's something I've been high on, but I'd be divvying away from the point. Yeah. But I feel like Kolosov, if you give him at least that year and a half, 2 years to develop in the AHL, by the time it's time for him to come over, he's put into a better situation where he's more primed to succeed than thrown into the fucking alley where a bunch of freaking teams are just going to pick this guy left and right. I think it's about finding the time and letting him smoothly transition his way to the NHL when you feel like he's ready and he has a better chance to succeed. So that's my final takes on it. I want to say I think he comes over. This has been a roller coaster. Things have gone up and down over these last few weeks with things. But at the end of the day, I do think we're going to find him here donning orange and black. I can't say that for 100% certainty, obviously, with everything that's gone down. But I feel more comfortable now, especially hearing the news we heard today. And you bringing up the goalie gear, too. That's a fabulous point. Than, say, a week ago when we heard Tony's drop take on the news as well. But, yeah, that's do you guys have any other closing things on Kolosov before we move on?
Nah.
All right. With that being said, let's go from one KHL star to another. Matvei Michkov has found his way to the Philadelphia Flyers. He had a pretty interesting press conference. It looks like, based off of everything that went down, that he's starting to understand English a little bit better. It was cool with that they sent a welcome party all the way to JFK to pick this guy up after he flew for 22 hours. Found his way to do an interview the next day with the media. And the first thing he says when he gets there, okay, can I hop on the ice? Okay, can I practice a little bit? That's awesome. That just shows the drive and how much this kid just loves the game of hockey. Mm-hmm. Jamie, I'm going to start with you on this one. What did you think about how they brought him over, the whole press conference? Has your expectations for him changed at all? Whole 9 yards in this.
I love the fact that how much he wants to win. I think that's pretty comforting, and all he wants to do is try to help the team win. My biggest takeaway from the press conferences was he's not an I guy; he's a team guy, and he never once said I, ever. And yes, he may be learning the English language still and stuff, but the first thing you learn is I, and we didn't hear any of that. He just said team. I want to win, but I want to try to help the team win as much as possible. That was the closest I that you could get. And I think that speaks a lot about his character. To me, that speaks why Danny Briere and Keith Jones met him at the airport. And I also think that they learned a thing or two from the Alexei Kolosov situation. Again, it's a rookie GM, a rookie president for that matter, right? And this is their first big fish coming, whether it's signing or whether it's their own homegrown. This was their first big fish. So, yeah, this is how much he means. Let's go and meet him at the airport. Maybe, they learned from the Alexei situation. And I think that, it just speaks volumes for who this guy is, for how powerful of a person that he is, but speaks vital for the organization that they really believe that he might be the second coming or the closest pedigree to an Eric Lindros that they've had since the Big E played for them, and I think they understand that. And I think that, they're doing everything in their power to hiring a tutor to help him try to, learn the English language. Maybe they'll hire a tutor for Alexei, do the same things. I think they learned a lot from that situation. And I think that it could help Michkov's case, possibly. Hey, let's hire a tutor. Let's try to get him adapted to the culture as much as possible. That's why they re-signed Igor Zamula. I got called out because I wanted to re-sign Denny Garyanov before, back in early April, and people called me crazy. And I thought that this was a great opportunity for them to do such, to at least sign him to an AHL contract to either help with Kolosov and help with Michkov if he made, the big club. People called me out for that, but I don't think that you could ever have enough, Russian players. Fedotov, Igor Zamula, are great. Hopefully they could help him and help him adapt. Fedotov has been here, throughout the course of the summer. So I think that he wants it. And I think that Michkov is going to start rubbing on the players, Joel Farabee, Tyson Forrester, Cam York, Jamie Drysdale. They're all, here, Louis Belpedio, Bobby Brink will be here at the Beauty League. You know what I mean? All these guys that are still here and never left, to include Oliver Bonk, Hunter McDonald, all those. Now they get to see what Michkov is. He is the closest thing that a Jaromir Jagr, his work ethic. They might have to give Michkov keys to the skate zone like they did Jagr, because of how much he wants to work. It seems that he has a good work ethic. So I think that this is comforting. And lastly, I want to say Flyers fans deserve this. They've been patient with this team, have stuck around this team. Yeah, they may complain, but those are all rightful complaints. They just want a winning. They want a winning formula, and Michkov, I think, will get them, there eventually.
Yeah, well said there, Jamie. Well said. We're going to have a few things to add to that shortly. But, Dylan, let me hear your takes on this. How did you feel everything went down? If you felt like they did a lot, how you liked the way they introduced him, any potential expectation changes as well?
Not necessarily expectations. I've always known the kid wants to work and he wants to play as much as he can. He wants to practice. That's been pretty evident. I think he's a lot stronger and has a lot more to him than people seem to think, or at least outside of the Flyers, at least, and that kind of fandom, because a lot of other people kind of just see this shorter kind of kid that just he put up 40 points in the KHL, whoop-de-doo. But there was a lot more to it. If you watch every game, he played through sickness. Like he never
one lung pretty much for a month.
He never wants to quit. He'll go until he can't anymore, and he'll play through injury. He'll play through sickness to help his team win. And so, but I think the Flyers handled it really well compared to bringing in another, just a prospect and letting them come here and kind of letting them adjust to themselves, because they realized Michkov is a big deal. They realized this was their first real draft pick as rookie executives, and they know it's a big deal to the fans as well. So taking that initiative to go out and see him and carry his bags and his sticks and everything, like, it's
that was
the little,
cool. I like
it's
that
the little things, like it's just those kinds of things, and it makes a difference. Like, fans were talking about it, like Michkov was happy, like, and the press conference was great. It's just how you do everything and how you bring it in, and just whatever the attitude you bring is the attitude he'll give back. There's like, if you give him the cold shoulder, he's not going to be happy. Like that's just the way it is. And Michkov probably knows he's like meant to be like the next guy in line for them, and so that's a lot of pressure for him too. So you got to make it as easy as you can on him. Like he's a kid, like he's basically my age, and that's ridiculous to go halfway across the world and be like that next up and comer, like beside Bedard. And like he is our Bedard, and he probably knows that, but again, that's still a lot of pressure to maintain. He has his own goals in mind. He knows the points he wants to hit and the milestones and stuff, but it's just allowing him to get to that point and building around him. Like you should start doing that. Like he needs the 1A guy to work off of. So
I agree there 100%.
But yeah, it's just the support and everything too, right? So like just make this as easy as possible, because like he needs to feel like this is home for him for the next couple months here to get fully adjusted. And furthermore, like if he needs to live with someone, like where are you gonna keep him? Like, you know, like this needs to be a whole thing, and this whole summer you need to work with him and work on his English, and just there needs to be a lot here rather than just playing hockey every day.
Yes.
It's a business. Like there's things under the carpet people tend to forget about, and they immediately put pressure on these kids, and some fall flat, and then you wonder why, because you put this pressure on them. You thought way more than you should have about them, especially in their first couple of years. So, but yeah, he's got to get adjusted, especially for road trips and stuff. Like Flyers have a brutal road trip to start the season. They're going out my way, like Canada, to start the season. And there's back-to-backs in, I think, like 2 weeks, and the Flyers are brutal in back-to-backs. So it's going to be a lot. So he's a kid. He's going to take in everything. Like he's going to take in Canada for the first time. He's going to be traveling with the team. He's going to experience NHL hockey. Like there's a lot to unfold. He's going to play against McDavid in his second game of his NHL career. Like it's a lot to unfold for the kid. So we'll see how it goes, but I have expectations for him, but I'm going to keep them on the low, and so should everyone else, because there's a lot to consider here. But I think the Flyers did a good job in handling it.
And Dylan, I tend to agree on the way you ended this, especially. You bring up the fact that it's going to be a lot more than just getting used to hockey life. It's about getting used to just living here in the United States in general. The only other time I think that I know of that he came out to the United States was for the draft last year. And then other than that, he really doesn't have too much familiarity. It's going to be about learning, you know, the American language, getting more accustomed with the Russian tutor, to learn American language, the English language. You know, it's interesting too. His mother and brother, as mentioned prior, are coming out here as well in the next month or so. So that'll be good. He'll get a little bit of comfort with that. And, you know, it not only learning the English language, but learning it to learn with the hockey etiquette and the way of the game, like learning, as Danny brought up, like he brought, like just learning a lot of the terms and things that they're going to be telling you that you're going to learn to get accustomed to, compared to the way they spoke in the KHL. I'm not too familiar with that. I'd be lying if I said I did. But one big thing we haven't mentioned, I'll give you guys an opportunity to bring this as well. Michkov's potential relationship with Tortorella too is going to be interesting as well. You know, I see a lot of out-of-town reporters saying, "Oh, is this going to be an issue?" You know, Torts doesn't like the flashy style of play. I don't agree with that at all, because there's two things when it comes to Torts that you need to look into. Number one, John Tortorella loves someone who puts his balls on the line for him and works his ass off. Yeah, Michkov's defensive game might not be the best, but he'll learn that over time. That can be adjusted with coaching. I'm not overly concerned for that. I don't expect him to ever be a Selke candidate or anything even remotely close to that. I expect him to be an offensive war machine that has the possibility of, when he hits his prime, of putting up 100 points a season. And I think he can do that when he hits his prime. But as you both mentioned, let's temper expectations a little bit. I don't want to throw this kid into the fire and say, hey, go drop me a point per game season right off the bat. No, I think him getting around my expectations around the 50-point mark. I don't think that, especially if he gets top 6 minutes, that would be great. I'd be elated just to see that, maybe even in the mid-50s. Who knows if everything goes right. But, not to go too much into personal accolades, as you mentioned, Jamie, like how he gets acclimated with the team. And Danny Briere, I like how we took a little bit of pressure off him, saying, we don't expect this guy to be the savior right away. We don't want this guy to think that he has to do all this.
Yeah.
Like, we're not bringing him here, expect him to, carry the load and be the instant number one guy. We just want him to, get acclimated, play his game, learn to play Flyer hockey, learn to play the NHL style of game, and learn to be, learn Tortorella's system. And it's going to be interesting, especially to see how Tortorella and Michkov, when they have that first potential disagreement, because it's going to happen. But that's the competitiveness of two guys. I don't expect them to ever agree on everything. There's going to be a point where probably Michkov does one thing that Torts isn't crazy about, and he'll let him know. And, how that, confrontation goes will be interesting. But at the same time, I think Torts is the type of guy, like he's Jamey Konecny, who just signed a mega deal. We'll get into that in a little while. But as he's Jamey Konecny, he has said multiple times, TK does a lot of stuff that makes me want to pull my hair out, but that's what makes him is how good he is. He lets him freelance sometimes. I don't know if freelance is the right word, but he lets him do his own thing to an extent. And, there's going to be a lot of that with Michkov, too, once he gets some comfort with the game. And that's what I expect. I see a low to mid 50-point season out of the guy. I'd love to see higher, but I'm not going to go over the top. I could see him, having issues the first quarter of the season, just getting acclimated to NHL hockey. As Dylan mentioned, they're starting right off the bat with a crazy Western Canada road trip, which we all know how that usually goes. I think they went 1-3 in it last year. I'm just glad they're getting it out of the way. I watched
it all.
Yeah, the only game I think they won was Vancouver, if I remember correctly. But, I look at this and I'm hoping – I would have hoped they started at home because I think that would have been awesome. But, October 19th is going to be awesome when they have that home opener. I'd love to see how the fans are going to lose their mind the moment they announce him, when they're announcing the lineups for everyone for that big celebration for like 20 minutes to say, hey, welcome to the 2024-25 season, and show all the players and coaches and whatnot. So that's going to be a special moment, not just for him, but for the fans as well, to just say, hey, the next guy is here. The next savior. Our next Lindros. Our next – I think he's got a higher ceiling than Giroux. Our next superstar has a lot. But if you guys want to add on something with him and Torts, let me know what you think.
Yeah, I just think he played – we have to remember he played for Rotenberg, who is a very tough coach.
That is a true point. That is a very good point.
So to me, they're both equal. Just they may handle stuff a little differently. And like I said, there's little information coming out from Russia, but both are sort of similar coaches. Like, I'm going to be honest, we don't know why Mitchie, I call him Mitchie now, whether it's going to be his, going to be his nickname or what, but we don't know why he was benched. We don't know why he was loaned to Sochi, and stuff like that. It's a weird situation, but both are similar coaches. They're both very tough. They're both, they want to win. Mm-hmm. But they also want players that are team, put themselves in everything team first. They want team first players. That's who Torts is. He wants people to love and be a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. He wants people to love being here. He wants people to love being on this team. He wants people that love that crest on, that care more about, the name on the front than the name on the back, that is their team, and if you steer away from that, okay, then you're out with me. If there's one instance to where that they put something else ahead of the team, then Torts maybe has that in his mind. Oh, is this guy a team first player, or should I give him top 6 minutes? Should I give him bottom? But he loves it. It's one thing that Torts, and you alluded to it, he loves not only team first players, but their work ethic. his work ethic alone is going to win Torts alone. Going to win Torts over. I mean, this is a guy that's dedicated. He would camp on the ice if he could at the skate zone. He would pop, but there is no doubt in my mind the guy would put up a tent right now, sleep on the ice. That's how much this guy loves the sport of hockey. And you can't tell me that Torts wouldn't relish that. For people to believe that Torts and Michkov right now would have an issue, that's beyond me. I don't understand where this is coming from. I think it's a narrative that people have that Torts has a problem with every player, and he doesn't. He just wants the best from every player, and Frost and Torts have cleared the air. They have a great, have a good relationship now. I wouldn't say great, but they have a good relationship. They understand one another. And sometimes meetings do that. And there's no doubt that Michkov, if something happened, that Michkov would be like, hey, I want a meeting, because he wants to get better. So I think that both of them, both Rotenberg and Torts, are sort of similar coaches to where Michkov knows what to expect from Torts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. You make a lot of fair points with that.
So I'm thinking I think he's going to struggle in the beginning of the season. I think it's going to be like a Tyson Forster situation. Same thing. He struggled, offensively for the first 10 to 20 games, really found his niche. I could see Michkov, trying to understand who Torts is. This is a whole different, not only is he learning a new culture and stuff, but this is a new coach. He has to learn what Torts is about and what he likes and what he doesn't like, and I don't think there's enough time in training camp and preseason games to divulge into that. They could get a real good niche done, but I still think that things are going to linger until you actually play game action. That's why I have him pegged at 21 goals, 26 assists for 47 points, just because I think for the first 10 to 20 games, I think it's going to be a feeling out stage. If he does well those 10 to 20 games, and I can see him going over the 50-point plateau.
Yeah. That's fair. That is fair. That's what I think too. He could have a few speed bumps. Dylan, any final thoughts with his potential relationship with Tortorella before we move on?
Just the same kind of what Jamie said with Rottenberg and stuff. And Michkov had all respect for him when he was leaving Russia, and it wasn't like
they had a good relationship. That's fair.
He wasn't mad at him. He respected what he did. He respected the decisions. I think Ronberg and Torts, they like more of a winning team. They like the veteran presence. They want to win now, that kind of idea. I've had my ups and downs with Torts. He's a great coach, but I think he's still kind of at the wrong time for the Flyers. He's more of a guy that gets more out of the vets. That's what he did with Columbus and sweeping the Lightning. He relishes off more of the older guys, and I think the Flyers are still a little too young for his kind of style and his approach. He's trying to make a cup team out of this early, but at the same time he's also trying to develop the kids. There's a lot of levels to it, as just Torts as a coach in general. So I think he more likes the veteran kind of teams, but I won't say he hasn't been terrible with the young kids. He obviously works well with them. He got the room going. Everyone was clicking at one point. And even if when you take away some players, things seem to still work out. Taking away Walker at the end of the season, and then things kind of plummeted after that with a couple injuries and stuff. But I think if you only take Walker out of that room and everyone stays healthy, I don't think you lose those 10 whatever games that you did at the end of the season and you're in a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Again, do I think they should be in a playoff spot and in that bubble team still? Probably not. I would like to see, I like the culture. I like they don't feel the need to lose. It's a bad look. You're tanking for the bottom, whatever. But I think fans are also tired of this bubble-esque kind of idea. Literally since the bubble, when COVID, the COVID year, they haven't been the same since. And a lot of people thought after that year things were going to turn around. This was going to be the Flyers in a couple years. We're going to get a cup. But then again, things regressed and kind of unfolded again. So, I mean, it's hard to predict. It's hard to see. Like, the Flyers like an old school type of hockey. I think Keith Jones still does. I think that's kind of what brings them together. But Michkov and Torch shouldn't have any problems. I think, like Jamie said, there'll be some working out at times. But again, I don't think Michkov will hate him for it. I think he'll respect it, and he'll know his role to begin. Maybe he gets beat out by TK for the first, like, for that first line right wing at times, and maybe Michkov has to earn that top ice time. I don't know, because you just paid TK a crap load of money. I know we're going to get into that, so this kind of a segue into it. But
let's do it.
TK got a high payday, so Michkov has a lot of work to do over the next 3 years of his ELC. I would like to note, I know you, Alex, you said that Michkov has a higher ceiling than Giroux. I tend to agree. The only problem I have is I don't want the Flyers to waste Michkov's career the way they kind of
agreed.
Giroux's was. I wouldn't say Giroux's was. It definitely wasn't great at times. Like, they had a couple runs, they were in the playoffs a bunch, but near the end of his tenure with the Flyers, it was more him dragging everyone to the fight, and it was more of Giroux trying to fix this all together and battle against the Penguins.
Broken team, yeah.
So, like, I really don't want Michkov to have to do that, and I really want to see this team come together for once and actually be a strong cup contender. Like, but we've also run into dynasties before, like the Blackhawks. Like, in past years, the Oilers took a cup from us. So Detroit, like, every time the Flyers were there, the dynasty showed up, and it was the team that beat them out. And unlucky, but I really don't want to see Michkov's ELC wasted, and I don't want to see his whole career be wasted. I really hope there's a cup in his future in Philly. I know that he wants to bring one here. So yeah, that's kind of just my thoughts. There's a lot to unpack. We'll see how it goes. I just really hope it's not the way Giroux was handled and just thrown away kind of to the wolves there. And then he ended up leaving. So you never really want to see that happen to your one guy. Like, Crosby's still there, Ovechkin's still with his team, and they've won cups. They've reached the top, right? So you never want to see that happen. But yeah, that's just my thoughts.
And that's a very fair point. We don't want the tens of mediocrity where we're making the playoffs every other year and being first round exits like the entirety of 2010. Little known fact about this: the Philadelphia Flyers in that 10-year span became the first team in the four major sports to alternate making and missing the playoffs every single year. I don't know if you gentlemen knew that. But from 2012 to 2021, they did that for 10 straight years of alternating making and missing the playoffs. That is the first time that had ever happened in the four major sports. But with that being said, let's segue.
I did not know that, to be honest with you.
See, little known fact you learn each day. But with that,
I knew they did it, but I didn't know that they were the first. Let's put it out.
First and only. But on to the TK news. This is probably the main event of our talk show here. Travis Konecny on, I think what was it, Monday? I want to say, no, it was a few days ago. Ended up signing a super ultra mega new extension.
Yeah.
8 years, $70 million, $8.75 million AAV. First 6 years of this deal is a full no movement clause. Last 2 years, I think, is a modified no trade.
It's modified, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 14 teams, I want to say. We're going to have mixed opinions on this, I have a feeling. So, with that being said, Dylan, lead off. How do you feel?
Initially, I mean, I wasn't even on my phone, and then I kind of checked it like 40 minutes later, and then the news came out and everything.
Mhm.
I tend not to agree. I'm starting to kind of come around to the idea, but again, I think it's too much for what you've gotten out of him.
Mhm.
Especially if my only concern is that you're paying him the idea of big bucks, like a first line kind of guy,
Mhm.
yet say Michkov after this season to the next, he's the guaranteed one guy,
Mhm.
then you're paying TK a first top line minutes, but he's playing second line. He's playing behind Michkov. He's playing less minutes than Michkov, whatever it may be. So that's only my concern is I think you're paying him big bucks to play below the first you're paying him to be a first guy, but he's not going to be.
Mhm.
And unless Michkov becomes a center or TK plays the off wing and you kind of mesh them together, I think that'd be a pretty cool line of TK and Michkov. But again, I don't know how that would work. Like, it's just, I think TK prefers the right side. But more on the contract, I think you could have gotten more for him rather than signing him. And maybe you couldn't have. Maybe they tried and they looked elsewhere and they didn't like what the return was, or the offers they were getting, they were kind of like, whatever. But it's just, I don't think he fits the timeline here anymore for where his age will be and where everything else stacks together for when you want to compete. If your window is going to be 2028 to 2020 or 2032-ish, that kind of area, he fits in sort of, but then you're reaching the tail end there. And the way he plays, there's a shelf life there, similar to like a Nick Sealer, similar to those kinds of guys like a Gallagher. And it's just hard to see how this contract will go until you actually finish it out. I don't want it to turn into a Sean Couturier type of situation. I know it's more prone to see like the 8-year deals with the high price tag and the cap is going up and all of this, but I tend to not like the 8-year deals because it locks you up, especially if you're signing him with a no trade clause and the no move clause, and then you're handcuffing yourself. Like, you're not even capable of trading him anymore. Like, and the idea of signing him a year early, I don't necessarily get that. Like, obviously you like him, so you want to get him under contract, yada yada yada, before he becomes an RFA, UFA, whatever it is. But I tend to not like that because if he has a terrible year this coming year, then you're stuck with him for an 8-year deal.
Mhm.
And you just paid him the crap load of money you did because he played and he had 68 points or whatever the following year, right? So it's definitely complicated. I think there could have been something else out there. I don't hate TK. I love him as a player. He's a great guy. I've seen him in Calgary and Edmonton and stuff because his wife's out here.
Mhm.
If he wasn't going to resign, I thought he was going to come out here for sure. Obviously, that didn't happen. But yeah, it's just, you got to sign him, right? Or you got to get rid of him. And the Flyers chose to re-sign him. So, but I will add, I think this puts the Flyers in a little bit of a cap strain more than they think it does. I think once you get rid of the LTIR or whatever, and you move Ellis's contract or Risto or whatever it may be, but I think you have less cap going in than you think you will, because you're going to have to sign York. Forster's needs a contract. I think there's another
Morgan
few
Frost
guys. Frost
and Noah Cates.
Frost only signed to a couple of years. That was a really weird contract after
Mhm.
all it took and all the talk and things not going certain ways, and then he just signed for 2 years. So I don't know.
You got
But
4 guys coming up. Noah Cates being the last one. Yeah.
yeah, and you just signed Brink. Like, there's guys you need to re-sign here and guys you need to consider bringing in from your depth and like prospects you have in the pipeline and guys you have coming into the Phantoms again next year, possibly with guys having later birthdays or whatever it may be. Bjargson pushing for spot. Like, there's so much going on that you have to consider with the money, because adding all these ELCs are great because they're cheap. They keep you there. Like, that's what the Leafs need. That's why they have Nyes. Like, they love the cheap contracts, right? But they're going to be wanting paydays. Like, York's going to want to get paid for sure. Like, Forster's probably going to get like maybe a Brink. Yeah, or maybe kind of like a Brink kind of deal, maybe a little less than that. But he's also played a little bit better and seen more ice than Brink, so I don't know. But either way, they're going to want to get paid. So it's picking your battles and seeing how things go, because if you move on from guys like Farabee or Frost, that's two guys you don't have to pay anymore, but you're also getting things back. So unless you're just getting picks, you're going to have to bring in more cap, and you're going to want to bring in a 1C or sign a 1D, try that again, but you failed with Ellis. Like, it's just really complicated to manage the cap and be under that, because for the longest time, the Flyers before the lockout, the cap wasn't a thing. The Flyers went out every free agency and every deadline and got the biggest guy out there because they didn't have to worry about the cap. And that's how they built a contending team, to build around Lindros and Leclerc. And so to build around Michkov, you got to consider what you have and don't have. And I don't know how well TK fits to all this. He's not an 80-plus point guy, but he possibly could be on another team. Like, it's really just picking your battles, and I'm 60-40 on this one as of right now.
60 on the no, I assume?
Yeah. I was probably a 90-10 at one point earlier in the summer.
And he said, let me take a step back and breathe for a minute.
and wanting him to be traded, especially for the draft and getting more picks or whatever. But then the Flyers and the Flyers said they didn't want this draft. So it's like I said, picking your battles. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I tend to not agree fully on it.
Jamie, what's your thoughts?
I respect Dylan's opinions, and he wanted more assets, and TK was a guy to get more assets. I've always been against trading TK, and today, sorry, with this contract, it doesn't waver my opinion. The thing is, if TK didn't get hurt this past year, he would have potted 40-plus goals. So the Flyers got a steal with only signing him for 8.75, because if he hits that 40-goal threshold, now you go up at least another $1 million to $1.5 million. So now you are at around 9.5 to 10 million per. So I think that this was their number one off-season priority, was to lock up TK if they wanted to. And the reason I wanted that, if he hits that 40-goal threshold this year, he would. And there's no doubt in my mind this next off-season, either A, he probably would have hit free agency because the Flyers wouldn't have afforded the 9.5, 10. They wouldn't have paid it, and they would have dealt him at the trade deadline. A guy that's going to hit a 40-goal threshold, it goes up. The prices go up. 30 goals or more, it goes up. Tippett, they got it as steal because he didn't hit that 30-goal threshold, and that's why I wanted them to lock up Tippett, was because if he did hit that 30-goal threshold, it went up another $1 million. So now you're paying him $7.5, $8 million because he hit that 30-goal, right around where Sam Reinhart is, right around where Timo Meier is, and right around where Travis Konecny is where Tippett, would have been around. So now we're talking about prices going up. The Flyers have more salary cap. I think this is a big offseason for Morgan Frost, like Dylan alluded to. This is probably the biggest offseason because I could see Frost centering TK. If Frost can prove he's a 1C, then the Flyers can cross that off, They no longer need a 1C. You have Morgan Frost as the 1C. Yeah, they'll have to re-sign him and pay him money, but that you cross that 1C, because I think, this is just my personal thing, I think that they're a 1C and a 1D away, from being a contender. So I think that they need, you add a 1C, I think they move the needle a little bit. I think they're now okay at playoff level. They obtain a 1D somehow. If Jamie Drysdale can be that this season, you have your 1C and 1D that would be the perfect storm for the Philadelphia Flyers. If Frost were able to prove he's a 1C, if Jamie Drysdale is able to prove that he's a 1D, you now have your 1C, 1D. And I factor in Tko'd because, health and being older, and stuff like that, and being a veteran presence. But I think I think here by 25, 26, I start thinking, because of the addition of Michkov, I think it speeds up the rebuild. They have money to spend in 25, 26. If they get Draisaitl, that's your 1C. I'm just saying. They're going to go after a big prize. And to go piggyback off of what Dylan said in terms of not, surrounding Claude Giroux, that's quite, you're absolutely 100% right. And guess who is there for some of that? Danny Briere was the assistant GM. And I think that
and he played with G too.
What's that?
And he played with Giroux too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that alone helps and say, hey, we got to surround, Maffei. We got to surround Michkov with, some talent here. Because if we don't surround him with talent, we are going to waste his years. So I think that Danny, this is a good thing for Danny, being the Flyers general manager now. He was there for those Giroux years through, thick and thin, through both player and front office. And I think that'll help him now. I think that at some point, if Michkov comes to his own, and it's funny Dylan says that, I want him to become a center. I think they can move him to the center. Of course, not right away. Let him be his own. But what if Michkov becomes the 1C now? That would be quite interesting. So there's a few things, but I think that locking up TK was the biggest priority, in my opinion. He's a good player. You're not good in the NHL with back-to-back 30-plus goal seasons. That means you're a good player. You would be a solid player if you didn't have back-to-back 30-plus goal seasons. Only 47 players in the NHL this past season scored 30 or more goals, and TK was one of them with 33. So you're a good player. If you're potting 33 goals in the NHL, which has become a hard-scoring league to score in, obviously, since only 47 players scored 30 or more goals. It's not as, offensive as it used to be, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's becoming a little more defensive. I hate to say it, but the goal-scoring totals are a little bit down here for, since, say, Wayne Gretzky was playing and stuff. You know what I mean? So now it's harder to score goals, although you have your Alex Ovechkins, making it look easy, and stuff, and Connor McDavid, who's, insane, in his own right. Yeah. They just make it look so easy, but it's actually hard to score a goal in today's game. And I think that, Travis Konecny potting 33 this past season, he's a good player. And I think that he's a good player to hold on to, because I think that the cup window is going to start to begin here in a year or 2 years. I think Michkov coming over speeds it up.
I want to add a few things. To Jamie's point, even Ovi struggled to score at the start of the year. Like, he had 8 goals in 30 games, and people thought he was done.
He was and then that first 30.
And then he picked up, he was just unreal and got close to 30, I think, at the end of the season. It goes to show how hard it is to score. I mean, I agree with Jamie's points. There's two sides to this. TK could come out flying next year and almost pot 50. But one thing I will say is why he was out was because of injuries. And that's another concern that I kind of picked up on now is the last 2 years he's been injured. And for a good amount of time as well. It's not 1 to 2 games. It was a good 7 to 8 sometimes.
And even when he came back, he was not playing in 100%.
He wasn't the same until until like the All-Star break or until there was another big break where he could really just kind of relax for a minute, and then he would come back and kind of reframe himself. But
Even that
that's
last
another
part of the
concern.
season, I felt like he wasn't.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
obviously he could pot 40 to 50 goals, but he has to stay healthy is the same thing.
Yeah.
One other thing I will say is Briere, Jones, and Torts, I think they think a little bit on differently on the skill aspects and what they need to bring in. I think Briere likes the smaller kind of skilled guys, and he wants the Michkovs and the Barkeys and more of those kinds of guys. I think Jonesy, he likes the more bigger and defensemen with the more grit on the back end, like the McDonald's and the Gills and what they've drafted recently. And then Torts, obviously, he likes the vets and likes to help the younger guys. I think if you can click all those together, then you do have a cup contending team. Like Jamie said, I think they're still a few years away. I think there's a few more glooming pieces that they need more than just a 1C and 1D. But that's not to say they can't figure it out soon and be contending in 2 years or whatever it is. And contending and then being an actual cup contender are two different things. You can be a playoff team, but not a cup contender. Like, they're two different things. And to be a cup contender, you need a lot more. And I think they can find that if you go get a Draisaitl, but I think you also have to be aggressive at the same time. And we've seen both of those kinds of things where Danny's tried to be aggressive and he's been a little quieter at times. So there's a lot to consider. But I think you need more of the smaller and the more highlight real goal guys than you need bigger. That's why I tend to not agree with this last draft we had. I think you needed the Cole Hudsons and the Christopher, the Humphreys and those kinds of guys over the bigger, leaner guys that you have to kind of wait for. Like Sanheim, we waited for a while because he wasn't bulky enough. Like one summer he was a stick, and then he had to put in the time and effort to then come back and put on 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, it's a hard road. But especially in this day and age where you need to score more and you need the more offensive dynamic guys more than your shut down, like bigger Broad Street bully kind of style. But if you can mesh that all together, perfect. But you can't have one or the other.
One thing,
yeah. I like obtaining the assets, to be honest, because I think it'll give them more arsenal to move Ryan Ellis's contract and give them more affordability cap wise with offloading. I firmly believe
that's a possibility.
I think Ellis's contract's going from now until the trade deadline, because the first few weeks of the season, or leading up, you're going to have those teams creeping to the cap floor. And I think that, Ryan Ellis's contract, I think, would help, teams who are looking to add just for cap wise, cap dollars. I think that, getting more assets, I think will help that, try to offload and give them more cap flexibility.
I'm going to add a couple things here as well, gentlemen. So my take on the TK deal, as I've mentioned in prior weeks, I've always been about 50-50 on TK. I would have been fine to having him back, but it had to be kind of at the right deal. It's kind of funny the way we have this place. The left side, Jamie, is the pro-TK more. The right side, Dylan, is the anti-TK more. And then I'm right in the middle, and that's kind of where this is. I've always been right in the middle for TK, but I wanted him back at the right deal. My first thought when I saw that deal was like, what in the hell? Why did we sign him to that much term and money? I was hoping around that 6-year, $8 million range is like my max personally. And I thought when I saw some of the comps like Buchnevich, Sam Reinhart, Jake Getzel, that was going to drag it down a little bit. Mind you, 2 out of those 3 guys are signed in the state of Florida, and they have the tax-free crap that gives them a little bit of an edge. So that definitely helped bring their contracts down a little bit. But still, when I look at those 3 guys that I mentioned as pretty good comps, I figured, all right, maybe this will bring TK's deal down a bit, because we knew he wasn't getting $10 million. And right at that beginning when we heard that was the ask, we knew that was not happening. But I thought it was realistic. We could have saw him in that 7.5, 8 mil range after all that. I wasn't going to go crazy and say, oh, yeah, when those guys are all in the 8s, he should be in the 6s. No, we know that the tax has something to play in the perspective with this. And he was dinged up in the last third of the year. But another thing that leaves me as an issue for this, too, is there's a giant logjam at right wing. They have a lot of guys, they have Michkov, they have Konecny, they have Bobby Brink. They have now Samu coming over soon, too, potentially. They just got rid of Atkinson, so that gets rid of one body at the right wing spot. They have an abundance of wingers, though. And I feel like doing this kind of means one of your guys is going to be playing third line minutes no matter what. And that guy's likely going to end up being Joel Farabee, barring he gets moved. But I feel like signing TK does cause a bit of a logjam where he could have been used to potentially find a true 1C. You know how much, I mean, I don't know if he would have been a legit 1C, but you know how much in prior shows I was raving about Marty Natchez, like how much I love his game. I would have loved to potentially maybe ring the bell on that or the Trevor Zegras, door. I mean, now both of these things are no longer happening. Natchez and Zegras are likely staying with their teams, but it was just, some examples. Now, Dylan mentions an interesting point, too. TK has dealt with some levels of injuries the last 2 years. I think 2 years ago was a wrist injury, if I remember correctly. And then this year he had the oblique. And obliques are a pain in the ass. Those things linger. I've seen it in hockey. I've seen it in baseball. Not too much as football, but the injury history when a guy is going to be soon to be 28 in March, I believe, it is something to watch. Now you essentially have this guy under contract for 9 years. Is this going to be something that lingers around years 3 or 4? Now that the last 2 years, this could be an issue. Do I think TK will play up to that contract in the first couple of years? Good chance he does. Maybe not right at the 8.75 mil point, but something close to that I could definitely see. Jamey, you made a fair point. If he avoided injury, he probably does hit 40 goals. I think he's been trending up these last few years. In my opinion, he's a top 10 right winger in the game. He's great at what he does when healthy. But then I look at perspective of this, and Dylan mentions an interesting point that I was going to add on. He plays a very physical style. He kind of reminds me of Brad Marchand a little bit. Maybe not quite as good, but the style of play that he has. Now, in my opinion, if this deal is going to end up aging well, the Flyers need him to become the next Brad Marchand, where a guy who plays at that physical level ends up aging well. Marchand really didn't hit his prime until I think around like age 28 or something like that, and then he took off. Now, this year he took a little step back, but he's 35 now. That's expected. Where Konecny, he really has found it the last 2 years since he stepped up being a leader both on and off the ice. Is he going to be someone that you can consistently hope that is going to put up 30 to 40 goals, almost probably 65, 70% of the time? I know it's unlikely that this guy ends up producing at that level the last 2 or 3 years. And I've mentioned in our group chats before, I'm also with Dylan in a perspective of 8-year contracts. I'm not a giant fan of them, unless if you're signing a guy in the early years. The Owen Tippett deal is an example where I love an 8-year contract. 25 years old, minimal to no injury history. You got him to a fantastic deal. In my opinion, that's going to be your next first Sean Couturier contract. I think there's a real possibility that he ends up being a guy that ends up having a contract that ages extremely well and ends up being in a position where you look at and say, oh, wow, this guy's worth way more than $6.2 million. Now, with Konecny, I waver a little bit. I was at the time saying, when I looked at the comps, I wish you could have got him for a little bit less. And another thing that brings into perspective is the cap. Now, I think they have to move a body or two before next offseason if they're going to be willing to spend. If the cap goes up to the projected $92 million total that has been estimated, they're going to have $19.45 million. So we'll call it $19.5 million just to round it to sign a couple guys. So they'll have York, who's going to be looking for a hefty raise. Frost, who we'll see how things end up. You're going to have, obviously, Noah Cates. we'll see what his number ends up at. It depends how he plays this year. He could even end up being on the trade market if you don't think ends up going well, and you can see if you can save some money there. And then who did I miss? Oh, Tyson Forster, who is probably going to see a significant raise. Maybe you get him to a bridge deal. We'll see on that. But when I look at this, it really just comes down to, is TK going to be worth it? What are you going to do with the logjam? Because as Dylan mentioned, I don't know if he's going to be getting first-line minutes unless maybe, as you mentioned, maybe Michkov moves over to the center spot. Maybe even try to move TK over to left wing in his later years to maybe make the two of them mesh together. Having Michkov and TK in the same power play, or maybe even if you add Owen Tippett to it as well, there is no excuse this team should not be at least a top 20 power play this year. You have more than enough talent. You have now a full offseason for Jamie Drysdale to get acclimated to the point. You have an abundance of talent on that team where that power play has no excuse not to be bare minimum top 20. So they should improve by default from that alone. But, is the 1C still lays a question mark?
Yeah.
Do you have the 1C already? I'm going to go with most likely not, but you never know. Maybe, as you mentioned, Frost ends up surprising some people. I'm not betting on it, but who knows? Could happen. Maybe Michkov transitions there after a couple years. I definitely don't want him to, probably at least right away. But, if he surprises us, maybe you could even test that theory out. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that they're doing this right. I don't want to be putting them into the cap hell logjam that you're in. I want to make sure that this Konecny contract isn't going to be a burden because, Couturier, for example, he's not all his fault. It's not all his skill, but he had 2 major back surgeries. We all know Father Time's going to be knocking on its door at some point, and I think he's got a couple good years left in him. I don't think that Couturier you saw in the second half of the season is the Couturier you're going to get this year. We found out the guy was playing through a sports hernia like Jamie Drysdale, and those are a bitch to play through. So I'd like to think he's going to be back to 100%, close to the Tko'd we saw in the first half of the season in pre-back surgeries. And, that could be a big help. You throw Michkov or Konecny next to him, that could be a big production boost because you got someone who's worrying about the defensive side of the game who can help with faceoffs and even produce some level of offense as well. Maybe not to, prime Tko'd that we had when he won a Selke, but maybe something to 75, 80% of that. So I look at this whole thing. I'm more concerned of what the future implications could have on this. Do I think this contract has a possibility of aging well? Yes, I do. I think you could, out of the 9 years you have him, there is definitely a path you could get maybe 6 good years out of it before you start looking at it. It's like, all right, he's starting to fade a little bit. Could he turn into the next style of Brad Marchand? That's putting a little bit too much on him, but who the heck knows? But there's also the possibility of maybe by year 3 or 4, this thing starts weaning downwards because of the physical style of play Konecny has. And you look at it and say, oh boy, now we got this guy for 6 years slightly underproducing.
Yeah.
You've got him and Couturier into lengthy term contracts, eating up not only that much money, but pretty much 2 guaranteed roster spots as well. So when it comes down to it, I would probably say I was more on Dylan's side on this, not exponentially much, but I look at it and say, is this going to benefit you in the long haul when you're competing? Is he going to be part of the window when you're ready to compete? Well, could you have gotten him for less, like the Buchnevich, Reinhart, Getzel deals? Mind you, like I said, 2 of the 3 were in Florida. Who knows? He's here. You got him for an 8-year deal. He's part of the future. Tippett's part of the future. Michkov's part of the future. Likely Tyson Forster is. There's your 4 wingers. You no longer have to address that. I think there's a good chance Farabee is potentially moved because you have such a logjam there that you're going to have to end up getting a center. But we'll see. So at the end of the day, I think this contract has the possibility of being good, but I'm worried. I'm cautious. I'm also cautious about the ripple effect of what this could do as well. So I love Konecny. I want the guy to be a beast. I want him to be an 80-point guy now if he's going to be put at least a 40-goal guy minimum. One of those 2 accolades I want him to be hitting if he's going to be getting the money he's getting.
Yeah.
But with that being said, Jamie, do you have any closing thoughts before we head out? We lost Dylan there, it looks like, but
no, I think that's about it. I just wanted to allude to this is going to be Cam York's and Tyson Forster's first contract.
Yep.
So they're not going to get paid as much as some people think.
Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. I want to see what what their cap situation looks like. I think they're going to still, if they want to get
it's going to be a busy trade deadline.
They're going to have to move at least one significant contract.
It's going to be a busy trade deadline.
Whether it's Risto, whether maybe it's Farabee, I don't know. But if they're going to make a splash in free agency like next year in the center spot, as we have claimed them to need to do, it's going to take moving bare minimum one contract of probably 5 or more. I don't know which guy it's going to be yet, maybe even 2. Who knows? But it's definitely going to be something to watch. But with that being said, great show again. Jamie,
appreciate you
coming on. Dylan, I appreciate you coming on too, even though you're not here anymore. You were awesome, both of you guys, as usual. I love having both of you guys on. I look forward to doing this again.
No, you guys were awesome, and your fans are too. So, and much appreciations for, your partnership, your friendship, and your fans. I mean, the fans are phenomenal. So appreciate it all.
Love you guys. Love you both. Love all the fans.
Yeah, we love you too, man.
Thank you all from Don't Fuck With Media for having us yet again. Tune in tomorrow as well. We'll be doing a little more recording when we talk about the Central Division and have a little bit of a sin bin action. Jamie,
nice.
Would you like to join us for the Central Division talk if you're free tomorrow?
I would love to. My wife starts camp, so in terms of basketball camp, so I probably won't be able to be honest.
All right, that's all right. We got to have you for the Metro episode, though.
Absolutely, I'll be on for that.
But with that being said, thank you for coming on, Jamie. Thank you for coming on, Dylan. And you guys have a great rest of the night. With all that being said, peace out and let's go, Flyers.